Now we need to code in the artificial intelligence or the computer selection, because we're versing the computer. So when we click rock, we shouldn't know what the computer is going to select, and it will give us an outcome if we won or not. So we have a function ready from the last video where we do everything to do with the results page. We will put the code in this results page function because this is called multiple times, not just once, not just like everything else in here. It's just called once and then it's left. But this function is actually called multiple times because we reset and we come back and we choose another button. And then this function is called again and again and again every time we play and play and play. And that's the beauty about a function, is that it can be reused and we don't have to rewrite that function over and over and over. So inside of this function, we need to make a computer selection. Let's go back up because we remember that we have a variable for a player. So let's have a variable for a computer. We're going to make that, we're going to make that empty when we first start the program. And inside of the results page function, every time this is called, we need to make a new selection for a computer, a random one. And we know we have 3 options because that's how rock, paper, scissors works, right? So how do we get the computer to make a random selection between rock, paper, and scissors? We know that there are 3 options, so we could, and this is how we're going to do it, make the computer randomly select a number between 1 and 3 because that's a built-in function. There's a random function under math. Here we go, random number. So if I drag that in here and I say random number between, if we hover over, it gives us a explanation, returns a random number in the closed range from min to max. So this 1 means minimum and the maximum. So a random number between 1 and 10. In our case, we want a random number between 1 and 3. And I'll put a semicolon there. But this is just going to give us a random number. How are we going to make this actually work? We need to put in the computer variable, this number, every time we call this results page function. And I made a boo-boo up here because this is going to return a number, not a string. So I'm going to make this computer selection actually 0. And what we're going to put in the computer variable or container is that 1 to 3 number. And this will change every time we call the results page. So at the very start, it's set at 0. Then we come in and we click on, let's say, rock, and it calls the results page. It skips to here. It puts a random number in computer, so that might be 2. And then based on 2, we need to then set the computer's image. So how do we translate a number into the name of that image? And that's easy. We do it like this. We might change the computer's selection to, let's create another variable and call it the computer image. It's too long, so I'm going to call it the CI, stands for computer image, and that'll be a blank. And this, I'll put a comment here to say CI stands for computer image string. So again, demonstrating the beauty about comments. And based on this computer selection of 1 to 3, we're going to say if computer equals 1, then I'm going to set my CI string to rock. Else, if computer, the random number that the computer spits out in here, is equal to 2, then I'm going to set the computer image to rock, paper. And then else, we don't have to put an if there, because if it's not a 1 or a 2, then it doesn't really matter, because whatever, there's only 3 options. So if it's a 3, then it must be else. And the CI would be rock, paper, scissors. So now we have a CI as text. We've converted a random number into a random string, just like we put a string into the player variable up here. Now we have the computer's string version in here that we don't know about as a user's, from the user's perspective. And now all we need to do is, you remember, well, we've got it right here. Remember how we set the property of the empty object for the player? Let's go into the design view and get rid of this image. Make that empty. We know how to set that because we did it, like I said here. All we need to do is copy. And we're going to set, whoops, not that. We're going to set the image property of, let's just confirm what we called it, image computer. We called this empty image box image computer, and we're going to set its image property to, so image computer. We're going to set its image property to, we've got the CI now. We've got the word of its selection. So all we have to do is call this, or change this variable to CI, and we know it ends in .png, but we also know it starts with a C. All the computer images start with C. I'm going to go back and explain, just in case you're not following. See, it starts with a C underscore, not a P underscore. That stands for computer. And all the C underscore images are blue. I thought they look more computerish rather than just duplicating the skin tones of the player version of those images. So now we go back to the code. It's going to use the C version of those images and put in whatever the random selection that the computer makes. Let's see if it works. Start. I'm going to select rock. He selected scissors, or she. I don't know what the computer is, he or she. I'm going to play again. So it selected scissors before. Now it selects rock. I'm going to go again. Paper, scissors, rock, rock again, paper, rock, rock. So you can see rock again. You can see it's random between the three. That's basically only setting the image, though. We haven't set the logic for this title up here yet. So let's do that now. The hard work has been done because we have two variables. We have the computer selection, or the computer text in CI, the computer image, and we also have the player. So we need to see if they are equal or not. Let's see if they are equal. We can go like this, make a new if statement and say if player equals the same as CI, then it must be a draw. And if it's a draw, I'm going to change this label. Let's go back to design view and just confirm that we rename the label to LBL result. So the LBL result, we're going to change the property of the LBL result, set property of LBL, oops, not level, LBL result. And we're going to change the property, its text property. And we're going to say draw. Only if they are the same. If we're going to, because there are three scenarios, there's if a draw, or if you won, or if you lost. How do we work out if we lost or if we won? And we need to have, basically three scenarios. This is where it gets a little bit complex with if statements. Let's start off with the player scenarios. So there's three scenarios that a player will select. If the player equals rock, then we've got to check what the computer selected, right? If, let's put them all in now. If the player selected rock, paper, then we've got to see and select whatever the computer selected. if the player selected rock, paper, scissors, then we've got to check again what the computer has selected. And we know what the computer has selected. So now we need to nest some if statements. If the player selected rock, and then if the computer selection, the CI image in this case, is rock, paper. So we don't want, because we've already set up the draw scenario up here, right? So if the CI is paper, then what is it? Rock. If I'm rock and the computer's paper, then the computer wins. So all we need to do here is copy the set property for the label and say you lost. We need one more if statement in here, because if the CI equals, sorry, I forgot an equal sign there. That's a boo-boo. So if it equals scissors, I'm going to open the curly brackets and close them. Then we're going to set the property again and say you won. So again, I'm going to put some comments in here. Just put in a short few hashes here to say this is the logic behind win, loss, draw. In fact, this should go above here because we've got the draw. This is the draw. And then we've got each of the three possible ways it can go in terms of the player and then the computer selection. I'm going to copy those computer selections and put them in the player's if statements, but obviously we have to change these. So if the player selects paper and the computer selects scissors, then I lose. If I select paper and the computer selects what is it? Paper, rock. If the computer selects rock, then I win. Now, the last if statement, if the player or if I select scissors and the computer selects paper, this is the lost one actually. So if I select scissors and the computer selects rock, I lose. But if I select scissors and the computer selects paper, then I win. Let's see if it works. I'm going to select rock. He selects scissors or she, and it says I won. Let's try and lose. I'm going to go rock again. Oh, draw, and it changed. I'm going to go rock again, draw again, and I lost. So there's the three scenarios, and it's clearly working. So we had the example of if they're the same, we set the property to draw. We had if I was a rock and they chose paper, it changes it to I lost, which is this one right here. It obviously ignores these next if statements because the player hasn't selected paper or scissors. I've only selected rock. And we had the scenario when I chose rock and the computer chose scissors, and then it changed it to I won. So there's all the logic for the label. And now how do we get the scores working? So the scores, we've already got the if statements ready there. So let's go back up to the top and create some player score. I'm going to call it P score equals 0. Put a comment. This is the player score. I'm going to create a computer score. That's going to be equal to 0 at the very start also. Don't forget your ending line semicolons. And this, I'll call this the computer score. So at the start, again, we set them to 0. When we reset, that'll get set to 0 and play. When we go run, they get set to 0. And now we can keep a counter by just simply adding 1 to these variables every time a player or a computer wins. We don't need to do it here. This is if it's a draw. So we might put this, no, we'll leave that there because we can understand that. That's a draw. We don't need to do anything with the scores, right? If I lose or I lost, that means the computer, the C score, adds one to, or gets one added to it. Let's do all the lost ones. So I lost again, and I lost again. And if I win, I get a P score plus plus. Now, how do we show that score in the label? So let's go back to the label, the results label. We need to show that in here. So the way we do that is, you guessed it, we set the property of those labels. And those labels, if you remember, we name them to LBL player score and LBL computer score. So we need to copy at the very end. So at the very end of this results function, we've got all this stuff happening. And then after you've done all that processing and all that stuff, we need to set the label. Set both labels. So the LBL player score, we need to update the labels. And the LBL computer score, we're setting the text for both of those objects to, it's going to start with player and then a colon, and then I'm going to add on the variable container. So this is going to be the P score. Whatever number is in the P score. At the start it's 0, right? But whatever we get through here, I might add one and it will show here. And then so that will show player around, if I win the first round, it'll show player 1. And for here, it's going to say computer, and we're going to plus the C score. That's it. And that every time we reset, it's going to do the process the calculations of adding 1 if it needs to, if it wins or if I win, and then resetting the labels to the updated scores. So let's run it and see what happens. Start, rock. It was a draw, so you notice that they are left as is. Play again. I'm going to go rock again. Here we go. I win. So player goes to 1. I'm going to play again. I'm going to go rock again. Computer won that time. So player is 1 and computer is 1. And I'll go rock one last time. Computer won that one. So he goes to 2 or she goes to 2. And I stay on 1. That's basically it. There's your rock, paper, scissors game. All done and dusted.